So I was watching SNL. Jake Gyllenhaal was the last host for season 49. And he came out in a billowy shirt. And I was like, man, that reminds me of the 90s. I said, maybe it's a new trend. And then he pulls out a microphone and he starts singing Boyz II Men's End of the Road. And then eventually, as you see, Kenan Thompson, Ego Woodham, Devin Walker, and Punky Johnson would dress like Boyz II Men from Motown Philly, and they joined them. And Gyllenhaal did good. He kind of messed up a vocal here and there, but he was solid. Like, I'm a Gyllenhaal fan. I think when I look at Ryan Gosling, I think Gyllenhaal, that's the career that Gyllenhaal probably should have had, was Gosling's career. But he's had a solid career. He's good. He was really good in that Spider-Man movie, playing Mysterio. Underrated villain. But yeah, shout out to Jake Gyllenhaal. But so while I was watching that, I was like, man, this reminds me of the greatness of Boyz II Men, and how Boyz II Men is one of the greatest pop groups ever who doesn't get a lot of love. So the history of Boyz II Men is, if you don't know it, they're from Philadelphia. It was 5 of them at the time. They were fans of New Edition. They named themselves after the New Edition song Boyz II Men, sang by the great Johnny Gill. And they were able to get backstage of a BBD concert, which featured Michael Bivins. Michael Bivins was starting a label for Motown called Biv 10. They sang for him backstage, and he liked them, and he signed them. The problem was, if there was one glitch, there was 5 of them, right? So it was Wanye, Sean, Nathan, Michael, and Mark Nelson. Everybody except for Mark were minors. So the problem was they had signed a bad management deal in Philly. Because the 4 were minors, they were able to get out of it. Mark was 18, and the label, the management company wouldn't let him get out of his deal. So he had to watch his friends go off to be Boyz II Men, and he ended up being a solo artist and a songwriter. And it was always amazing to me because when Boyz II Men went down to a trio, because after Michael left, I was always curious, like, how come Mark Nelson never came back? But, that's a whole different thing. So they signed the deal. They put out Motown Philly, produced by the great Dallas Austin. I was on that album. It's So Hard to Say Goodbye was on that album. But then the Boomerang soundtrack came out. The great Boomerang movie, Eddie Murphy rom-com that I love dearly. That's very underrated. And it featured End of the Road, which was at the end of the movie. Great R&B song, produced and written by Babyface, Daryl Simmons, and L.A. Reid. I liked the song, but I had no idea that pop radio would love that song so much, and it spent 13 weeks at number 1. 13 weeks for End of the Road. And if you weren't around back then, talk to your mom or your grandmama or your granddaddy or your dad and tell them how you couldn't go anywhere without hearing End of the Road. That song was huge. So then Boyz II Men drops the 2 album with the first single, I'll Make Love to You, which I thought at the time was produced by Brian McKnight, because they had worked with Brian McKnight on the Christmas song Let It Snow. Great Christmas song. Let It Snow, so good. But no, it's produced by Babyface. I'll Make Love to You. If you want to propose, if you need a song to make love to your woman, play that song. So good. That spent 14 weeks at number 1. 2 does great. Then they jump on Mariah Carey's One Sweet Day. A beautiful song. I don't know why we don't hear that song enough, because it's about a song about people who are no longer with us. It should be played like Memorial Day. We should, just like we hear All I Want for Christmas Is You every Christmas, we should actually hear One Sweet Day by Mariah Carey. That song's so good. Speaking of Mariah, I saw a crazy stat that she's never won an MTV award. Like, because I was wondering, like, because at first I say, man, Mariah Carey's never won a Vanguard Award. Like, Jennifer Lopez has a Vanguard Award before Mariah Carey. But Mariah Carey's never won an MTV Award. She won a Vanguard Award in Japan, but she's never won one here, which is just crazy. Because I was thinking, like, because Boyz II Men has won a Vanguard Award. And in fact, Boyz II Men, I think it's time for all these award shows to get some love to Boyz II Men. Yes, they haven't had hits in a long time, but man, the damage they did with their first 3 albums, even with the 3rd album, when they had The River Runs Dry, I think, Water Runs Dry. I forget that title sometimes. Those 3 albums are so good. The first 2 albums were great. And if you can look back to that time period, and Boyz II Men, it was a lot of fierce competition. When they came out in 1991. It was Boyz II Men. I remember I bought these 3 albums the same day. It was Boyz II Men, Jodeci, and Color Me Bad. People goof on Color Me Bad today, but that debut album, CMB, you had I Want to Sex You Up, My Adore, Alpha. It's just it was so good. And then you had Jodeci, where I say Jodeci and Boyz II Men are like the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. Because Jodeci's debut album, you had Stay, Forever My Lady, Come and Talk to Me, You and I'm Still Waiting. That's off the debut album. We didn't even get to Freaking You yet. we even get they made the album's so good. And then we have Boyz II Men. And it feels like when it comes to Boyz II Men, it feels like these shows like the BET Awards and Soul Train and Essence, it's almost like they Boyz II Men got penalized for crossing over. And they shouldn't be. It's not their fault that pop radio loved them. They work with black producers, man. It wasn't like they had albums produced by David Foster or Linda Perry. They worked with Dallas Austin, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, L.A. and Babyface and Daryl Simmons. They were making R&B albums. Dallas, when we talk about Dallas Austin, that was almost like at the peak of New Jack Swing. That was like New Jack Swing was in the middle of its run. It was starting to decline. New Jack, like Motown Philly sounds dated today because it was in the New Jack Swing era. So I don't know why BT and Soul Train and Essence don't give these guys their love. But shout out to Boyz II Men, man. I think they're so underrated. I miss the R&B vocal. Like when I hear In Vogue's Hold On or Shy, If I Ever Fall in Love Again. Like when I hear these songs, I hear harmonies, man, it's great. When you hear the ending of End of the Road and how the vocals end because they just break down to a cappella, it's a beautiful thing. And shout out to Wanya Morris, because Wanya Morris could have gone solo, because he had the Brandy track, Broken Hearted, really good. We don't hear that song enough either. Broken Hearted with Brandy's really good. He could have gone solo, but he stayed, and it's still a trio. Now, the tragic story, so you had tragic story number one with Mark Nelson not being able to get out of his deal. Tragic story number two is Michael McCrary, who was the bass singer of the group. And they were fine in the beginning, then Michael started to have back problems. And because at points he was sitting down when they performed, and then sometimes he didn't show up for the show. And I guess the guys felt like he was lying, and he left the group. And it's come out a few years ago that he has multiple sclerosis, but he didn't tell them. I guess because when you're in your 20s, you want to tell people that you're that sick, and how do you're not mature enough to kind of say like, hey man, I got MS. Like I think today will be a lot easier, but he didn't tell them, and now they don't have any type of relationship. So I hope down the road I hope they bring it together, because they were good as a foursome, and plus they were all friends. But when it comes to Boyz II Men, I don't know why labels don't sign R&B groups. They stopped signing bands a long time ago, but the R&B group is so needed because there's a lot of singers today who can't sing. It's like these labels would rather sign someone with auto tunes than have to sign the three-man group, a four-man group, a four-woman group who are great vocally. But thank God for TikTok, because TikTok, there are a bunch of kids playing instruments. You see bands. I won't say kids. There's young adults. They're bands. They're playing instruments. There's young R&B groups. I saw this one group. They remind me of Soul for Real. Like there are so many really good singers that you can see on TikTok. And I guess that's the beauty of music today, that if these labels don't want you, you can build a following on TikTok. You can build a following on YouTube or Twitch, whatever platform you're on, and you just could build a career off of that. You don't need record companies anymore. You can just, you'll have a nice living. You can make 6 figures a year, maybe 7, and you don't need record companies anymore. But I wish they would, because I think it's good for the kids to hear this thing. Like we haven't had R&B groups since Drew Hill and Jagged Edge and Nyx. And I wasn't the biggest Jagged Edge fan. I like them. But today I will take a Jagged Edge so I can at least get some singing again. So shout out to Boyz II Men, shout out to SNL, shout out to Jake Gyllenhaal for reminding us how great End of the Road is. Tell me, what is your favorite Boyz II Men song? I gotta say, for me, it might be I'll Make Love to You. I'll Make Love to You. And tell me what's the most underrated song. I think the most underrated song is I. Because they sing like just, these guys wearing bow ties, they sing like just nice guys. And they are nice guys, but then they drop the I. It's like, whoa, they're kind of like Jodeci.